Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the event today. My name is Erin, and I'm an intern here at the MCC. And I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement before we start. So we recognize that Berkeley sits on the territory of the Cretan, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone, the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people, and we recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold University of California, Berkeley more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. As a practice, MCC interns would also like to move beyond just land acknowledgements to call us into how we can materially engage in Indigenous liberation and decolonization, whether that's on Turtle Island, Palestine, or beyond. We ask that you support land back and Indigenous resistance movements in any way you can, which I think this event really speaks to that. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Chamale and I'm a third year and this is my second year being an intern here at the MCC. We also, after doing the land acknowledgement, we also want to do a little quick history of the MCC. So I have a question for y'all. How many of y'all have heard about the Third World Liberation Front? Yes, a lot of people, period. So if you guys could see, we have a lot of artwork here, also here about like potential coursework about like what the ethnic studies was going to look like. So I want to do a brief history about that because we're rooted in that. The Multicultural Community Center is rooted in the legacy of the Third World Liberation Front, which was first formed at San Francisco State in 1968. Black students led the fight for students of color at SF State to create a Black Studies department, and later Third World College, which would engage in histories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The fight was spread to Berkeley in 1969, and the Third World Liberation Front will form as a coalition of Black, Native American, Asian American, and Chicanic Latino students who wanted self-determination within the academy and the Third World College. After a three-month strike, the Department of Ethnic Studies would be created. Third World Liberation returned in 1999 as the campus continued to attack the Ethnic Studies Department through funding cuts. In their list of demands, they asked for a multicultural center, and after a series of demonstrations and a week-long hunger strike, the MCC was created. As we move forward, we carry the core values, as you guys can see right here in these yellow posters. We are rooting in student-led, anti-oppression, cross-cultural understanding, solidarity, sustainability and wellness, and public education and social justice in our continued struggles for reimagined and liberated future. The space has an ethnic studies library, which can be seen over there, a garden that we have outside, resources for graduate students, free printing accesses, a basic needs cabinet that could be found back here, a snack pantry that could also be found back there. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask the interns at the front desk. If you'd like to learn more about the MCC, please check out our Instagram MCC interns or official MCC Berkeley for our programming and weekly hours. We typically hold events surrounding our core values, which are uploaded to our calendar at mcc.berkeley.edu. And some housekeeping things. The bathrooms can be found by the Amazon hub locker. So you take a left and then take another left, and they should be there. If you have any questions, you'll go to the front desk. So thank you for having this event here.
Hi. Oh my gosh. Welcome everyone. Can we just take a moment to look around? Say hi to your neighbor. Hi. Welcome to the MCC. Thank you all so much for that warm and important history and introduction. I also want to thank our sponsors and co-sponsors, the Pacific Islander Initiative, the Asian Pacific American Student Development Office, the Asian American Research Center, the Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies Program, the Critical Pacific Islander Studies Collective, CPIS, and also the Critical Pacific Islands and Oceania Studies minor program in the Department of Race and Resistance Studies, College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University. Yeah, let's give it up. My name is Angel Halafihi, and I have the privilege of being the staff person who oversees the Pacific Islander Initiative here at UC Berkeley. Thank you. The PI Initiative was actually started in 2019 by a group of, oh wait, sorry, I'm off script though, I can read. The Pacific Islander Initiative is a student-centered program started through student activism that serves the diverse and changing needs of Pacific Islander communities here at UC Berkeley. It was established in 2019 thanks to the advocacy of a group of Pacific Islander young people who advocated for resources specifically for Pacific Islander students here and won. Yeah, clap. Of course, that doesn't mean that the work of what we now call the PI Initiative began in 2019, but rather this all, including this very program, is all steeped in a 20-year-long legacy of PI student activism on campus and in the Bay Area. And so I'm really excited to celebrate with you all Dr. Ponipate Rokolakutu, our inaugural scholar for our Critical Pacific Islander Studies Scholar Residency here on campus. Can we give it up to our dear guest, please? Yeah, I was so lucky to spend the last few days at Poripate's feet this past few days, talking with him and listening to his stories. And I think one thing that I took away from our discussion is just the concept of the term student being colonial, students being colonial. That it implies that our young people come to this university only to be deposited with knowledge. But that actually what we know is that, especially at an institution like Berkeley, our young people come here with a reservoir of brilliance.
Yes.
Yes. They come here with so much more than academic knowledge. They come here with their families, their cultures, their stories, and all of their inheritance. And so as someone who has been here for almost 6 years, learning and advocating with our young people, trying to create spaces for our PI communities on campus, we know that we don't just want more Pacific Islander people here for representation, right? But that it's also that our Pacific people, our young people, our scholars, our practitioners, and our artists also have the answers to so many of the big questions that we have around climate change and climate justice, about land and language revitalization, about relationships. And so our students and our scholars, this program is so much more than our academic endeavors, yeah? So thank you again to everyone who made this residency possible, including all of you all for being here tonight. And thank you, Ponipate, for joining us for such a historic program here. So just a little bit of maintenance. Those of you who are here in person, if we could please turn off all of your devices that may make any noise. We also have people joining remotely. And so for our virtual folks, if you could please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and we'll include those later in the program. After myself, we'll hear from Colleen Lai, representing the Asian American Research Center. We'll also hear from one of our students, Richard, who will do us the honor of introducing our dear guest. And then we'll hear from, of course, Dr. Ponipate Rokolakutu himself, followed by time for Q&A, moderated by Bernadette Gonzalez, representing Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies. Thank you all. Next, we have the chair of the Asian American Research Center here. Please join me in welcoming Colleen Lai.
Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Lai, Chair of the, can you hear me? Of the Asian American Research Center, which I realize should be called Asian American and Pacific Islander Research Center. So to be fixed. Along with the PI initiative, actually, it's relatively new, just got started in 2020. And we're in a way also still a startup operation. So many things going on. One of the things I'm really proud of is the fact that we're doing a big cluster hire this year. We, meeting a bunch of people across campus, are looking to hire an Asian American and PI studies in different units. We're also offering and granting Southeast Asian American and Pacific Islander fellowships to graduate students and undergrads for the first time, something that we hope to offer for the next few years. So if you didn't make the deadline this year, please think about it next year. We're very excited to get that kind of mentorship going. So many other things. So just wanted to, say thank you and really appreciated the opening remarks by MCC and by Angel. It's great. So thanks for being here.
Okay. Buenas and Hafade Todos Hamzu. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Villagomez. I am a junior at UC Berkeley, and I currently hold the role of the Political Education and Community Engagement Chair, also known as the Peace Chair within the Pacific Islander Initiative. So my role, thank you. So my role mainly focuses on building biweekly seminars focused on political education and community engagement, working with other peace chairs within APOSD. And this is my second year interning with the Pacific Islander Initiative, which I'm very grateful for. And with that, I'll just be briefly reading out Ponipate's bio. So Ponipate Rokolakitu is Assistant Professor of Critical Pacific Islands and Oceania Studies in the Department of Race and Resistance Studies, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. Dr. Rokolakutu's genealogical roots as an Itauke from Fiji deeply informs his work. He is from the lineage of the Matanivanua to the Tui Kuku within the Toka Toka of Vosatora Nikuku of the Vanua of Nailagulapa. He completed his undergraduate degree in history, politics, and sociology at the University of the South Pacific. He furthered his education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, earning a PhD in political science. Dr. Rokolakutu's research is rooted in post-colonial theory, focusing on the impact of colonialism on indigenous land rights and marginalization. His work critically examines British colonial land legislation in Fiji, particularly their effects on the Itauke people. His broader research addresses race, indigeneity, and colonialism in Oceania, significantly influencing debates on land dispossession and Itauke economic development. Recently, Dr. Rokolakutu co-edited a special issue of the Okinawa Journal of Island Studies titled Our Sharpest Tools, Unsettling Empire from Islands and Ocean. The issue includes his own article interrogating British colonial benevolence and the annexation of the Fijian Islands, which explores the complexities of colonial narratives and their impact on Fijian land and sovereignty. Dr. Rokolakutu is an advocate for Pacific Islander communities and students in the San Francisco Bay Area, actively participating in initiatives like the 2020 Census Advocacy, COVID-19 awareness campaigns, and the establishment of a Pacific Islander Cultural District in San Francisco. He is also part of the Pacific Islander Stakeholder Roundtable and Listening Session with the White House. He serves as the Principal Investigator, or PI, for the Oceania Scholars Program at SFSU, which is a program that supports Pacific Islander students' retention, graduation, and success by addressing educational equity and providing culturally relevant support. Okay. And with that, I would like to hand this off to Dr. Ponipate. Okay. Thank you.
Let me compose myself and organize myself so that I can present a coherent presentation today. I was walking across from the hotel where I am staying, and I saw this notice on one of the notice boards. It says midterm next week, and I haven't been to a single lecture yet. How do you deal with this student, man? Bernadette? I was preparing for my talk, and there was an email from one of my students who said, Professor Rogagut, I'm here in class and nobody's here. I said, okay, go back to your Canvas, read your emails. I was absent last week. Okay. Those are the kind of things we face. Um, uh, let me say something here with regard to the organizers of this event. Give me some time. And I promise you, I won't be long in my presentation. But this is what I want to say as an acknowledgement to the organizers. I want to acknowledge the Asian American Research Center, the Asian American Diaspora Studies, the Pacific Islander Initiative, and the Asian Pacific American Student Development at UC Berkeley for fighting and for advocating for spaces like the ones we are witnessing tonight. There is also a series of acknowledgements that I want to do. And that is, I'm glad that the land acknowledgement has been done. I also want to pay respect to the Vanua that I come from. Since I'm talking about the Vanua, I want to acknowledge the Toranga Tipena, the Tibetigo Toranga, the Kumbuna, the Ranangone Toranga, and the Wunivala Natuka. Today is also a special evening that amongst us is a granddaughter, a great-great-granddaughter of one of our high chiefs that ceded Fiji to Great Britain, and she is Andy Vakumbau. Henrietta, she's known by the name Henrietta, but Henrietta Vakumbau. And it is so important for me to acknowledge that as a Martin Vanua, we are always the chief's spokesman. And it is also important that I highlight Andy Vakumbau's presence here because he's in Itauke studying cognitive science. That is quite unprecedented. And I'm just so grateful that we have in Itauke. I'm sure there are other Itauke students, but just to see someone that resonates with you is just a sense of pride and elation. And I wanted to acknowledge that. Also, turang talangan uno turang o bermasanga dengan merambal na rotun raketi turang na bunivalu o turang tukan na uno ganga biwakan na tawat. I wanted to acknowledge Angel today for the work that she is doing, creating a space in a place where there are obstacles and institutional obstructions in a space that I can say is featured with the structural white supremacy and everything that comes with it. And it's very difficult to create that space. And the fact that we are here today speaks to not only her work, but also quite importantly, perhaps equally important, is the collaboration and the support offered by the Asian American Studies and Asian American community, not only within academia, but in our different communities at large. There's also a very special person that I want to acknowledge, and that is Dr. Fuifuilupe Numetolu, who did a PhD here, but who has been particularly instrumental in the creation of this space. She is now a professor at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And I want to acknowledge that because I've seen her work, I've worked with her, And I've seen the kinds of sacrifices that she has made in creating a space for Pacific Islanders at UC Berkeley. Okay, that's what I want to say with my introduction. So let me go ahead and why did I come up with this topic, articulating the Vanua and grounding Pacific Island studies on land-based pedagogy, which at this table is small. Okay, so I want us to just to be very informal. It's a Talano session, so I want to speak for at the most 30 minutes, and then I would really love to have a dialogue, to have Talano, a Q&A session, where I think some of these things can become clearer, perhaps provocative, and perhaps create ideas for your research and other discussions that you have in the university. Articulating the Vanua, the thing that is missing here is decolonizing positionality. So decolonizing positionality and articulating the Vanua and grounding Pacific Islands and Oceania studies on land-based pedagogy. I wanted to say this, that the university space was not created for Pacific Islanders or other communities of color for that matter. And so when you go as a Pacific Islander or as a person of color to the university, you have to prepare yourself to go to a space that is not aligned to your culture, to your history, to your narratives, to your positionality, to your locals of enunciation, to the experiences that you come from. It doesn't give a damn about you. And that is why this space is important, because we do matter. The Pacific Islanders matter in spaces like UC Berkeley and elsewhere. And so it is important for me to bring this as I teach in my years of teaching, particularly in the United States, in Hawaii and in here. I realize the importance of addressing the concept and the experiences associated with this term called identity, the identity. That often students' identity affects the way they learn, consciously, and for the most part, unconsciously. And for the most part, uncritically. And so it is important that we go back to where we come from, that we examine our history, and we examine what's called epistemology. I often tell my students, when you are critiquing colonialism, you have to be comfortable with big words, because colonialism is not only big and huge in terms of process and practice and its impact, but also in terms of the kind of projects that they leave behind when countries transition to post-colonial development, to political independence. And so what I'm saying is that in order for us to dismantle the colonial structures, that we need to be prepared intellectually. There are language associated with the dismantling, and we should not be intimidated by those words. So the use of big words are not a display of intelligence, but really is the language, the language that is needed to be used, not only to describe, not only to deconstruct, but also to create a kind of discussion that is meaningful. Okay, so articulating the Vanua, the positionality, decolonizing positionality. When I walk into the classroom of my students, students have a different kind of expectation for a professor who has achieved the highest level of learning. Professor has a PhD, who's written a dissertation, who's involved in research. And so students look up at them. And often in our experiences, in my experiences included, that there is a big disconnect between what the professor represents and what the students represent. There is a disconnect between where they come from and where students and where faculty come from. There's a big and so the power dynamics is already established. You walk in as an academic, you walk in as a scholar. And at SFSU, and for Pacific Islanders, not only that they don't have that experience of being scholarly, of being academic in the diaspora, but also that they come from economically debilitative spaces, like myself. I come from, we grew up in the village, and often I was sharing my story that there were 8 of us in the family, or there are 8 of us in the family. I'm number 1. And at that time in the 1980s and throughout late 1970s and 1980s, I'm not that old, so 1980s, 1990s. Okay? The bus fare from where we live is 7 cents. And so I need 14 cents to go to school and come back. Often my parents can only give me 7 cents. So I go by bus so that I'm not late to school and I walk back. Often there's no food for lunch. Several times I was sent back from school because tuition were not paid. The teachers or the principal would walk in and said, could the following students stand up? Okay. You need to go home and tell dad and mom that your tuition needs to be paid. So several times it happened to me. I remember. Okay. So those are the kinds of experiences. And that experience is not unique to me. That experiences resonate across the overwhelming majority of it. Okay, my generation, including the next generation. And so it is important to me to be empathetic to that. It is important to me that when I walk into my classroom, that I project a sense of empathy, that I'm not the academic you are seeing, that I am a relative, that yes, I am a scholar, but I'm here to support you in any way I can. This is important. That yes, I have this knowledge that I want to share, but I also want to learn from you. And so it is important for me to use the concept of the Vanua in my classroom to decolonize positionality. I've just given you the positionality, the locus of enunciation. Where I come from is so important, both in terms of its indigeneity, but also in terms of its socioeconomic condition. The socioeconomic condition shapes the experiences, the learning experiences of people. All right, now I want to, can you read this? Yeah. So colonization. If colonization is about land dispossession, then decolonization should start at the land-based pedagogy, I wanted to say something too about this one. When you look at I won't be long, I'll finish. So I want to go through the gist of this. But this is important, the context. When you look at the development discourse, big word, the discussions involve development in the Pacific Islands. Look at the kinds of discussions that they have about development. That when we talk about development, we're talking about economic development, GDP, GNP, infrastructural development, development of the tourism industry, of real estate industry, of agricultural industry, make it palatable to neoliberal economic policies, to investors to come in. We talk about all of that. Development, money comes. What's the best economic development model that suits the Pacific? What are the kinds of economic model? It focuses on that. And so after 50 years, say the University of South Pacific, for instance, and I'm sure most of you have not heard of the University of South Pacific. It was established in 1969 where I went. And part of the major objective of the University of South Pacific, it was established at the time when most of the Pacific Island countries were transitioning from colonial occupation to political independence. Political independence. That's the only concept of decolonization that most Pacific Islanders know What is decolonization? Transition to political independence, period. And every year we celebrate the anniversary. Yes, we are politically independent. Several weeks ago, Fiji celebrated its 45th or 54th anniversary, 54 years of post-colonial development, right? But we are not often cognizant about the fact that, yeah, we are politically independent, but the socioeconomic reality of our people are still deplorable. As I speak, from where I come from in Fiji, more than 50% of our people still live below poverty line. And we continue to celebrate our political independence. Okay, and this is the punchline, that when we talk about economic development, we just focus on economic development, talk about development, economic development. That hardly do we talk about the curriculum. What we study in school shapes the national political discussion. What we study in school shapes the way people think, behave, and engage in the political. So this is why a land-based pedagogy is important. To go back to land, not land that is used for tourist industry, not land that is used for capitalism, land that defines me as an individual, land that defines me as a people, land that produces knowledge for me, land that gives me dignity, land that gives me a sense of perpetuity, the sense of belonging to land. Because our land is used for capitalism. And therefore, there is nothing there for us to reconnect with in order to nurture, entrench, and perpetuate our sense of who we are as a people. I'm talking about Pacific Islanders. And so a land-based education, when you emphasize land-based education or anything that has to do with land, indigenous land, it is an antecedent. It is you are speaking against the settler colonial politics, the settler colonial mindset, because the settler colonial takes away land. And any discussion to bring back land is a threat to that. And so I'm grateful for the land acknowledgement that has been done. And so how do you create a land-based pedagogy that nurtures a generation of Pacific Islanders in the diaspora? So I wanted to acknowledge these native scholars. That's why I put their names there. But there is this. When I was doing my graduate class, one of the difficult books that I had to read was The Location of Culture. How many of you have read this book? It's by Homi Bhabha. It's a difficult read. And but as I grew up academically and as I teach, I realized that some of the things that he's talking about, Homi Bhabha, by the way, is a post-colonial scholar. What is post-colonial? Post-colonial is a theoretical framework that critiques the impact of colonialism, the discursive impacts of colonialism. That colonialism, the impact of colonialism is complex. It's subtle. It can be apparent, not apparent. It can be conscious and complex, right? And he's one of those. And one of the things about colonialism is that it affects identity, the identity in the post-colonial, when Pacific Island countries transition to political independence, right? Yes, we are free. Yes, bloody British have gone, that we are here, that we see an indigenous Fijian, an Itaukei Prime Minister, an Itaukei-led government, that we are seeing the presence of the Itaukei in the political scene, but the economic reality is still way, way behind. And so Fiji, I'm not going to go there. So let me stick with it. And so Homi Bhabha talks about an identity in the post-colonial, an identity where, for me, as I was growing up, going to school, we were not allowed to speak English in high school. There's an English policy that you have to speak English. If you speak Fijian, you'll be penalized. And it is important to speak in English because you have to go to university. You have to speak English because English is the language of the formal economy. Because English is the language of capitalism. And often we don't realize that this is the economic system that was created to denigrate our environment, denigrate our bodies, denigrate our epistemology, denigrate every aspect of indigenous identity and indigeneity. And we have to speak that English, this language, the language of economic development. Yeah. That when we are thinking about economic development, how do you render native land, the Pacific Island land, to foreign investors to come in, invest, and generate the economy? And so the identity in the post-colonial, what Homi Bhabha said, is fractured. It is fractured because at home, I speak my language, I go to my grandfather, I mix kava, I practice the Matanibono thing, I present the Sevesevo, I learn in the ceremonial spaces, and I'm so proud of it until I go to school and I have to put on something else. Because school does not recognize me. And so when I finish education, you have a white knowledge in a black body. You have white knowledge in an indigenous Fijian body. And this is what Homi Bhabha says, the fractured identity. And it looks something like that. A fractured identity in the post-colonial, but a fractured identity also relates to the diaspora. The diaspora is also the form of post-colonial, where Pacific Islanders experience this identity crisis. And what is a fractured identity? It's an identity that is neither Caucasian white nor authentically indigenous. So you are not an indigenous Fijian or indigenous Tongan, but you are not also a Caucasian white. You are not also the American that is featured in the American dream. You don't come from our own home ownership background. You don't come from wealth background. And so you have an identity crisis, and you're also socioeconomically marginalized and oppressed. And this is the thing that affects our people. And so when students come into the classroom, they come with the impact of poor neighborhoods and everything that comes with it, and a loss and a fractured identity, because you are not connected to an ancestral land, you don't know how to speak your language, you don't know who you are, and you are fractured. And when you have a fractured identity, it affects learning. There's been research after research that have shown that those who are grounded in their indigeneity do well academically. I wanted to read a story. I won't be long, I'm telling you, I won't be long. But this is an important story by Konai Helu Thayman. Konai Helu Thayman is an educator, continued to be an educator, a very revered Pacific Islander scholar. And she was talking about her experiences, not in the United States, her educational experiences, not in the United States, but in the Pacific Islands, in Fiji. I wanted you to listen to this because it talks about the post-colonial. She's experiencing this crisis in the post-colonial, not in the diaspora. When she was a student, studying in Fiji. And she said, sorry, there's a fucking problem going on, you know. Okay, this is what she said. At university, I felt lost to relate to my lecturers, most of whom came to lecture and then disappeared, leaving the teaching to tutors and to postgraduate students. I spent a lot of time in the library, reading. At the university, I felt conscious about being Tongan. And after failing one subject in my first year, it was obvious to me that in order for me to succeed at USP, I needed to hang my cultural identity on the trees at Albert Park and forget who I was for a while. As for my aspirations of becoming a creative artist, The only art I learned at the university was the art of forgetting. That in order for her to succeed at the university, she has to sever every being of her indigeneity. And this is what we were taught, that culture is an obstruction to all kinds of development. And so this is why it is important for me as a teacher to address the issue of identity. So how does a land-based pedagogy heals this fractured identity? How does this land-based pedagogy help Pacific Islanders to engage with the institution, engage with the curriculum, engage in the classroom, learn meaningfully, and go out and engage in the fight for economic justice, racial justice, and climate justice? And so, Homi Bhabha talks about a fractured identity in a liminal space where you are neither white nor indigenous. And the liminal, in a liminal space, it's temporary. He talks about it, it's temporary. In other words, it's an in-between. It's a place and space of transformation. I use AI to show me how to. Hey, I'm one of the very few who's honest about it. So shut up. I used AI to sort of create a liminal space. And AI gave me this. I looked at it and said, okay, this one. This is a liminal space that is temporary. He talks about the fact that identity is temporary and it's transformational. Identity is also ambiguous and uncertain. It's a space where it's featured with ambivalence. You don't know whether you are going or coming. You don't know who you are. Think about that. When you do not know who you are, and you're trying to study Pacific Studies, and you're trying to go and do an education when you don't know who you are. And so in this liminal space is the critical Pacific Island and Oceania studies. The critical Pacific Islands and Oceania studies is built in this liminal space to address Pacific Island students and other students of color to navigate their identity, to negotiate their identity. Now, in this liminal space, it is also a slippery slope, because if you don't articulate an identity that is viable in terms of its indigeneity, in terms of its palatability to the diasporic space, in terms of doing well academically, then you will be submerged into spaces of incarceration, of mental health, and it's an abyss that you fall into because you don't know your identity. And so this is why the academic space is important. This is why this space is important, because you're not only nurturing a scholarly generation, you're nurturing a community to stay on top of this abyss. Because if you read the literature on incarceration and talk to those who are incarcerated, Pacific Islanders, one of the things that they don't know where they come from. They don't know the importance of relationships. Because if you're grounded in your relationships and embrace the reverence that comes with the relationship, you'll have a self of self-dignity, self-respect. And this is where the liminal, and so critical Pacific Island studies help students to negotiate an identity. How do you negotiate an identity as a Pacific Islander with regard to an ancestral land that you are disconnected from? How do you do that? How do you negotiate an identity where you are faced with the pressure of assimilation? That you don't want to be assimilated because you will lose everything that is so important to you. The melting pot means that your indigeneity is melted and you become someone that you are not. And so we have to be cautious of assimilation, because I keep telling my students that you would not want to be an American. You cannot afford to be wanting to be an American, because being an American is problematic. Yes. And so this is important. And so how do you craft an identity that is not American, but an identity that synthesizes your sense of indigeneity and your sense of living in a progressive space like the United States, like San Francisco, like UC Berkeley, like SF State, and any other spaces of higher learning? How do you mitigate this identity? An identity that is rooted, because you will not be a full indigeneity in the diasporic space. Let's get that clear. And so how do we do it? Those of you who know about Tuvalu, there was a recent documentary that came out by Coconut Production, is on YouTube, and it's called The Forgotten Pacific. It talks about the experiences of Pacific Islands in the climate change context. It talks about Tuvalu, that Australia is the first nation to have this relationship with Tuvalu. Every year, Tuvalu will send 280 people to migrate with dignity to Australia, because Tuvalu is going to submerge. Tuvalu will go down under the sea, under the ocean. And so the problem is that Tuvalu said, okay, well, what happened? We lose this, we lose everything. And so what the Tuvalus are doing, the government of Tuvalu, in consulting with people, supported by Australia and others, is that they're creating a digital community, so that when they go to Australia, they'll have this digital community to connect them to their land. And so and that sounds interesting to me, because it's aligned with this exploration of how do Pacific Islanders negotiate an identity that is rooted on ancestral land that they are far disconnected from, number one. How do they create an identity where relationships of Pacific Islanders are not necessarily here, the kins, your kinfolks are not here? How do you create that kinship in a space where your kinfolks are absent? Your kinfolks are back in the islands. How do you do that? But also, how do you create an identity that makes you succeed in the university? What are some of the values that we can draw from a land-based pedagogy that will enhance student learning, that will enrich student learning in academic spaces? And this is, or how do you use a land-based pedagogy to negotiate an identity that works for Pacific Islanders? And this is where, Critical Pacific Islands. So Critical Pacific Island is based on, operates, functions, is deployed in this liminal space. The deployment of Critical Pacific Island studies in the liminal space. And Critical Pacific Islands and Oceania Studies, one of its main visions is to help students navigate a viable identity. And it's going to be an identity of hybridity. How do we do that? Is the challenge of our people, of Pacific Island faculty and students. And they are doing it, But I want to talk briefly about the Vanua. Where is this going? The Vanua. What is the Vanua? The Vanua, when we talk about land in indigenous Fijian context, we talk about the Vanua. Now, the Vanua is just not the physical territorial space, as we all know. The Vanua is complex. The Vanua embraces both the liquid and the solid. The physical territorial place in the ocean, the rivers. The Vanua also embraces the cosmology, our worldview, the spirit world, their ancestors, right? Okay, now the structure of the Vanua, this is how the Vanua is structured. It's a structured entity. We have the extended family at the bottom, the Toka. Notice that the concept of family is not nuclear. The concept of family is extended because it's a communal, it's collective, it's collaborative. And then a group of, say, extended family forms a Matangali, a tribe, a group of Matangali forms the Evusa and the Vanua. So this structure, if you look at the arrows, the lines symbolizes kinship, that the Vanua is related. One of the police officers is a Pacific Islander, a white Caucasian police officer. We had a conversation. He said, "How come all the Fijians are related?" Because I met this, I stopped this person, and he said, "Oh, I am so and so to this Fijian police officer." So every Fijian is related to, all of a sudden, every Fijian is related to this police officer. But that's not, that's not being devious. It speaks about relationships, right? The importance of relationship. Okay, this is the purpose of this slide is to emphasize that each of this, that this is the structure. You have the chief, you have the Matini Vanua, you have the Mbete, you have the Mbati, the Matisau, the Ngonendau. That when you walk into your classroom, this is the structure, and every structure has a responsibility of keeping equilibrium in the Vanua. And so students have a responsibility. And we all have, you have a reading to do, you need to do this reading. I have the role of teaching, you have the role of reading and understanding. You have a role of collaborating in assignments. You have a role to do what is needed as a student. And talking about the student, I have problem with the concept of student. Because when I walk into my class as a Vanua, as a Matini Vanua and as an indigenous Fijian, I don't see student as student. I see a generation and emerging leaders of a generation. Because student is a colonial idea. It means that you are empty-headed, you go to the university to get filled. And that means the idea of student erases the knowledge systems of your ancestors, the knowledge system of where you come from. And one of the things I emphasize in class is that I respect the knowledge systems that you all come from, the epistemological framework that you come from. That epistemology, every culture has its own knowledge systems. And these knowledge systems were not embraced in the Eurocentric curriculum. Only until recently, we're beginning to talk about it, to incorporate it in academia. We hear the history of the College of Ethnic Studies. It's the fight to include the diverse epistemological framework of Black, indigenous peoples, and other people of color. All right, now this is how the Vanua looks like. The Vanua is complex. That when I say that I'm from Nailongalamba, that Nailongalamba, where I come from, is related, is centered in a web of relationship. Your relationship to fish, the animals. Most of us have totems. I was talking to a group of students yesterday. He said, find out what your totem is. My totem is the eel. And the totem reflects the habitat that you come from. I come from swamps. One of the issues that I have about Oceania as the epitome or as the basis of identity of Pacific Islands is that people like me have no idea of the ocean. The ocean is, yes, we live in the islands, but we live in the inland. My habitat, the habitat that I'm familiar with are the swamps, the tours, the deltas, the river deltas. Those are the places and spaces where I come from. And the ocean is sort of a far-fetched idea. And this is something that we as a people who inhabit the inlands of the Pacific Islands are beginning to talk about, to bring that identity. How do you embrace that identity in the discussion of Oceania? But, and so the totem signifies that the Vanua, that you are connected to the ecosystem. You are connected to the environment. And the totem also, in many ways, you represent the totem that you are associated with. Your tutu Vanua, a social relation, your vekau. And so what's the purpose of this? And so when you walk into the classroom, and as I begin to develop my my teaching, as I teach, that this is about relationships. The teaching in the classroom is about relationship, the embrace for that relationship. That assignments are done collaboratively. That most of my assignments that I give to students is group work, group discussion, group assignment, because learning is not an individualistic pursuit. Learning is not competitive, but on the contrary, learning is collaborative. Learning is group work. Learning is based on relationships. One of the things that I will end with this, I'm going to end, I have 3 more, that this is how a Veokani looks like, that you work together in the classrooms, that you have to build relationships in the classroom, that when I see a Tongan student in my class, I see the genealogy between where I come from and where this individual comes from, that there is a genealogical connection, that Pacific Islanders in my class, I relate to them in terms of the genealogical connections that we come from. When you create an environment, students engage. When you create an environment, students read. When you create an environment, students see themselves as stakeholders in not only the learning process, but in the educational process as a whole, teaching, learning, and sharing knowledge. And so relationship is so important. Going back to Helu Themen's story about being lonely. It's lonely because educational, the Eurocentric Western educational spaces that is so, that you can see in Berkeley, is very individualistic. So how do you create a space for Pacific Islanders and other people of color struggling with identity and the pursuit of knowledge to make UC Berkeley a place and space where they can make claim to that this is my place, that is based on kinship, on genealogy, a place that embraces your history and your narratives and embraces the role that you have for one another, or reciprocity. This is the second aspect of the Vanua, the Vekawaitaki, the Virereivi. Na Vanua e Vekawaitaki. Na Vanua e Virereivi. The Vanua looks out for one another. The Vanua have regard for one another. You regard the environment. You regard the different genealogy in your classroom, genealogies. You regard the socioeconomic environment where your students come from. You regard the commuting hours. You regard the fact that most of your Pacific Island students are also caregivers and they are also co-breadwinners in their family. And so as a Pacific Islander scholar, you're not a quintessential scholar that Helu talks about in referring to other lectures. The lecturers, they come and they disappear. Because that's how it works. They don't regard, that's their job. They come and teach. If you don't submit the assignment time, it's your problem. And so there is this disconnect between the professor and the student. But that is the colonial. That is in of itself a colonial setting. And so for Pacific Islanders, how do you create a generation of scholars in the liminal space? Is the issue and the focus of critical Pacific Island studies. That these programs are created in liminal spaces. And so at SFSU, as a teacher, you're not just concerned about teaching, you're concerned about the institutional structure. The institutional structure is not working. The university space is not conducive to Pacific Islanders. And so as I work with a group of PI faculties, wonderful group of people that we work with. We have been applying for grants. The first time we applied for grant, we were not accepted. The second time we were still applying and we were told there's no more grant. Why do we need the grant? We need the grant so that it helps us to create a conducive space for Pacific Islanders. We need grant to create a space for Pacific Islanders to go to consult, to navigate, to access resources, right? Because the lumping of Pacific Islanders under AAPI, as we all know, is problematic. We need our own space. Pacific Islanders need their own space. With due respect to the AAPI umbrella, it is not working for us. And so I'm grateful to the Asian American community, the Asian American Studies, and the Asian American community at large for supporting Pacific Islands Initiative to desegregate their data, to create spaces for them, and to create programs, academic programs that embraces the narratives, the epistemology, the history. And so they therefore nurture a generation of Pacific Islanders in the diaspora in the fight for economic justice. And so this year we were able to secure funding. And this funding will help us to address issues of retention, student engagement, and graduation. You know, this is something that we have to do. As a Pacific Islander scholar, I cannot afford just to go into the classroom and operate like a quintessential white scholar. We are not that, because we are predicated on relationships. The idea of Vivekani. And so it extends beyond the normal academic work, that you have to address the structure. Yes, we are able to secure Pacific Islanders tenure track positions, but this one will not work if the structure is not conducive to the learning process. And so this is why relationship is important. So we have to go beyond the classroom to address the issues of inaccessibility, of inequity, and the rest of it. Okay, the last idea I want to talk about is the Virengudi. The Virengudi, the idea of Virengudi is embrace for one another, to embrace. Now, the idea of Virengudi in the Fijian culture is only demonstrated in funerals. Funeral define relationships. This is so important in the Pacific Island culture, in indigenous cultures, because death is not the end of it. Death is the point where you highlight relationships with one another. Death is not about the person who has gone. Death is about those who are alive. That's a very important epistemology. It's a very important epistemological framework of knowledge production, that if you want to know your relatives, you go to the funeral. You reconnect. And in here, you see the picture on the left. You see on the funeral day. One of the very important things about funeral is that when someone dies, there are different messages. The message will be sent to people to go inform them that so and so is dead. That's so important. You go with cover. And one of the most important places that you go to is the relatives, the maternal relatives of the deceased. The maternal relatives of the deceased. This is important because the role of women and the role of motherhood is so important in our culture. When you look at the colonial narratives, you don't see the role of women in Fiji or elsewhere. And so this is important. And the relatives, the maternal relatives of the dead will come. They'll come on the day of the funeral. They won't come empty-handed. They will come with the biggest mat that they can get, piles of mat. They will come with pig. We don't take pork, we take pig. We don't take beef, we take cow. And then they come to articulate the intricate and the secret relationship of where Nawainisuru come from. Wainisuru is the milk, the breast milk. And so this is very important, where the milk, where the breast, where the lactating comes from. The Vanoa and Ronromekina, the place where the milk that nurtures you flow from. And they will come. They will come on the day of the funeral. And they will come with their own mats. This is what you're seeing here. And they will also take the body to bury it. They are the ones who are there when you were born. They will be there to bury you as well. That's very moving. That's relationships. That's reverence for relationship that need to be nurtured in the classrooms. And it is important because it's absent in the colonial structure. And so that's what you see here, the Verengudi. And then they also will bury you. And so, so how does a land-based pedagogy looks like? Again, I asked, AI to do it for me. So after looking at a series of it, it looks something like this. There's a university and a land-based pedagogy where relationships are embraced, where collaboration is preeminent, where identity, the identity, you see the ocean, the waves, you see the land, you see the canoes, you see the lagoon, you see the agriculture, you see the art, the culture, but you also see the university. The learning that is predicated on land-based pedagogy is so important to nurture a generation of scholars in the liminal space, in a space of brokenness, in a space that is fractured, that land-based pedagogy is important. And that as we think about critical Pacific Islands and Oceania studies, both at SFSU, elsewhere, and particularly in Berkeley, that this is a model that I want to encourage Pacific Island scholars. You're hiring, there's a hire for a Pacific Island scholar, that this is an important thing. Well, one of the things that I noticed on the first day is a sense of alienation of our people in this space. It breaks my heart to see that there's a sense that they are not seen. There are narratives of the fact that they are misunderstood. But if you create a pedagogy that is predicated on our epistemological framework, that this is an epistemological framework and a pedagogical framework that works for our people. I'm sorry, I took too long to talk. Thank you.
I think you're supposed to be up here. Good evening, everybody. My name is Bernadette Gonzalez. I'm a professor of ethnic studies here, and I'm the coordinator of the Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies program. We have just a few minutes left because you got into your storytelling mode, which is great, right? Which is what we sort of expected. So we don't really. The initial plan had been to kind of have you turn to the person next to you and kind of distill your thoughts. But in order for you to be able to ask your questions and for us to end in time, because we do have to be out of this space at 7:30, I just wanted to invite anyone who had a question, especially an Indigenous undergraduate or graduate, not student, but person with expertise. Person with knowledge, to kind of riff on or ask a question of Ponipate. And by the way, Ponipate and I did not meet in person until a couple days ago when we ran into each other, but we were at UH Manoa together. So like our circles we were meant to run into each other eventually and hang out. But I wanted to invite somebody who is an undergraduate or graduate, person with expertise, your own set of knowledge specific to your culture around land-based pedagogy, right? Especially because I feel like Ponipate was really kind of speaking to you, right, about the importance of an education that connects to your experience and connects to you and enlivens who you are. So do we have anybody who wants to be our first questionnaire?
Pinaka. Firstly, I'm Titilia Naitini, and I'm from Fiji, where our doctor is from. And before I share a few words, I'm so delighted that we have an inaugural that is here and is from Fiji. Thank you so much, Doctor. I feel the joy of seeing a Fijian at this level, especially UC Berkeley. I graduated from Monash University in Australia, but I also did my diploma back in University of the South Pacific, where Dr. Ponipati was, but I think I had gone there earlier. I'm here now, like 20 years ago, 1995, when I graduated from Monash in Australia. I did economics and management. I wanted to go to finances, and you could hear, the culture of the Pacific. Being a woman, that is not a place or space for women. It was mostly men. So I had friends who were graduates at the university who asked me, why don't you come and do this project? So I'm looking at what UC Berkeley is doing. It takes me back to how we have started this kind of program where we could bridge the community and create space where Pacific Islanders could learn and graduate. So what we did back then, we worked with USP, University of South Pacific, with a Unitec, a college in New Zealand, and I was in the middle, like a nonprofit. The School of Social Economic Development, where Dr. Randy Thaman, he talked about Professor Thaman, the wife. I worked closely with him, Dr. Randy, the husband. So he was in the School of Social Economic Development. They developed a nonprofit within the university where we could bridge or trying to get more students to learn, not only in Fiji, but in the Pacific Islands, to be able to be educated using the Vanua concept. So that is the knowledge I come up with. And I am so happy. Like when I landed here, most of us just landed in caregiving, but I'm a graduate. And I've gone as far as coming here to UN meetings. And coming here, who knows the Pacific Island? Nobody knows me. So I am so happy to be able to see Dr. Ponipati here. I'm not going to ask a question to him because I really understand where he is going to take us to as a Fijian as well as a Pacific Island. Thank you.
Would anybody like to ask a question? We are short on time, and I hate to rush people, but okay, great.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ponipate. My name is Roy. I'm a master's student here at the School of Public Policy, and I really appreciate just the wisdom that you brought forward this evening, and really the shoulders in which you stand on and the knowledge that you're sharing with all of us. My question for you has to do with Vanua and land-based pedagogy, and what are some best practices, some practical practices we can take with us in the work that we're doing, in the courses that we're taking, in the careers that we're interested in pursuing that are Vanua-based or land-based? Is there a framework? I know for me as a Tongan, there's a values framework that my grandparents had instilled in me. But I'm curious to hear from you what insights you could share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for your question. Yes, what can you take with you in an environment like UC Berkeley? I think one of the things that you need is a practical aspect of it, is to hang out with your Pacific Islander colleagues, Pacific Island students. That space is important because it builds kinship, it builds relationships. And that is important because it gives you a sense of who you are and where you come from. You can be lost in the world of individualism and individual self-pursuit. But as a Pacific Islander, as a Tongan, you are connected to the whanua. you are connected to your people. And one of the best practices that I can encourage you to do is to join the Pacific Islands group, the club. Join the club. See what you can do. Hear what the conversations are. Talk about the things, the collective experiences of invisibility, the challenges that you face. Somewhere along the line, you will find something that you can use in your academic pursuit to be consequential for our people. It's not going to come clear. It's going to come in different ways. But you have to predicate yourself, ground yourself on Pacific Island students, get to know them, share your ideas.
I want to plug in that regard. You said join the club. There's a Critical Pacific Island Studies Collective on campus. I want to plug them. They're doing incredible work, especially given the fact that UC Berkeley has not been an institution that has created space for Pacific Island studies or Pacific Island students. So they're doing incredible work. So if you don't yet know about them, raise your hand, Sophia. Go talk to Sophia. I think we have time for one more question if anybody would like to ask a last question.
I can just on a microphone to say hi. Hello, I'm curious in a land-based pedagogy for decolonization, what the role of water is, or thinking through water or with water.
You know, I come from a place where I live along rivers, waters. And the river is something that is not really emphasized in Pacific studies. We often emphasize ocean, but we don't drink the ocean, right? The ocean is salt water. This is why your question is very important. In Hawaii, water is very important. In Fiji, water is a symbol of life, but it's not Fiji, elsewhere. And so water is not only a symbol of life, but water is a means of transportation. Water facilitates movement from one place to another. Though our people in Fiji, we often talk about prior to colonialism, there was a lot of movements of people come from the hill countries into the coast, or come from the islands into the inlands. And after we, in our post-colonial space, some of the discussion is, where do we come from? And so we found out that it's the rivers. We did not sail in the ocean. I come from the inland. So we climb the mountains, we walk the trail, we cross the rivers, and we walk the delta. So water becomes very important in the respect, and in every way about the Vanua. Without the water, there is no Vanua. Without the Vanua, there is no water. I hope that sort of. And again, I apologize, for speaking so long. I feel so terrible. I'm sorry.
It's perfect, actually. We are all people who like to tell stories. So of course we're gonna get into our storytelling mode. So I would just like to ask you to thank our wonderful inaugural speaker.